On Father's Day, my daughter sent me a gift box. That was supposed to be a surprise, but my wife looked at it and whispered, "Don't open it." I asked, "Why can't you see?" I looked closer in frozen shock. 10 minutes later, the police arrived. You won't believe what was in the box. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Dad, do you even understand that I need the money now? Not after you die? The coffee cup shattered on the hard wooden floor, brown liquid spilled onto the Persian rug. Samantha's face flushed and her manicured fingers still trembled from dropping the cup. I gripped the inheritance documents tighter, 30 years of careful planning reduced to weapons to eye in my daughter's desperate hands, the papers crinkled under my white knuckles. Samantha, I'm not an ATM. You'll get your inheritance when the time comes. Peter lounged deeper into our leather sofa, his smirk widening. Come on, Will. She's your only daughter. What's a few thousand to help us out? A few thousand? The man had no shame. Last month it was gambling debts. Before that, Samantha's shopping sprees. The requests never stopped, only grew bolder. Help you out. I stood slowly, my 66-year-old joints protesting. I've helped you out for 3 years running. My retirement fund isn't your personal bank. Jessica appeared in the doorway, dish towel twisted in her hands. Please, everyone, just calm down. We can talk about this reasonably. Samantha whirled toward her mother. He's sitting on hundreds of thousands while we're drowning in debt. Debt you created, I said quietly, debt from your choices. The family photo on the mantel faced downward. Had it fallen during Samantha's tantrum, or had someone deliberately turned it? The silver frame reflected the overhead light like a mirror, showing nothing but empty brightness. Peter shifted forward, elbows on his knees. Look, old man, you're not getting any younger. Why not enjoy sharing your wealth while you're alive to see it appreciated, old man? The disrespect tasted bitter in my mouth. This from someone who never held a steady job, who lived off my daughter's credit cards and my occasional generosity, because I worked 43 years for that money. Each word came out harder than the last 43 years of 12-hour days, missed dinners, canceled vacations. So you could have a comfortable childhood, Samantha, so your mother and I could retire with dignity. Dignity. Samantha laughed harshly. What's dignified about hoarding money while your daughter suffers? Suffers? I looked at her designer handbag, her fresh highlights, her expensive jewelry, Peter's brand new sneakers. Their suffering looked remarkably comfortable. Your suffering is self-inflicted. The words escaped before I could stop them. Every crisis, every emergency, every desperate plea for money. You created them all. The silence stretched tight as piano wire. Jessica stepped fully into the room, her face pale. William. She whispered. Maybe we should. What? Samantha's voice cracked like breaking glass. Should keep enabling your selfishness, should keep pretending you're a loving father instead of a greedy miser. The accusations hit like physical blows. Greedy, selfish, unloving. 3 years of sacrifice, and this was my reward. Peter stood up, his expression shifting to something uglier. You know what I think? Well, I think you enjoy watching us struggle. Makes you feel powerful, doesn't it? Get out. The words came from somewhere deep in my chest. Both of you get out of my house, your house. Samantha's eyes glittered dangerously. Of this house that Mom helped to pay for. This house where I grew up. You can't just kick out your own daughter. Watch me. But she wasn't moving. Neither was Peter. They stood there like predators who'd caught the scent of weakness, waiting for me to back down, waiting for the usual apology, the usual compromise, the usual check written to buy temporary peace. Not this time. I walked to the front door and opened it. Wide, cool evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and the distant sound of neighbors' laughter, normal families having normal conversations. How long had it been since we'd laughed together, Samantha? I said, without turning around. Take your husband and leave. Don't come back until you're ready to have a respectful conversation about your financial problems and your solutions that don't involve my wallet. You'll regret this. She hissed, grabbing her purse. When you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you. Remember this moment. Remember how you chose money over family. Her heels clicked across the hardwood like gunshots. Peter followed, pausing at the threshold. "This isn't over, old man," he muttered. "Family doesn't abandon family." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence felt heavier than their shouting had. I stood frozen at the front door, my hand still gripping the brass handle through the decorative glass panels. I watched Samantha's BMW reverse aggressively out of our driveway, tires spinning on the asphalt. Jessica's soft footsteps approached from behind. "William." I turned slowly. The living room looked like a battlefield. Coffee stains darkened the Persian rug we'd bought for our 20th anniversary. Inheritance documents lay scattered across the hardwood floor like fallen leaves. The overturned family photo caught the lamplight, its silver frame, winking mockingly. "43 years," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "What, 43 years?" I worked overtime shifts during her high school years so she could have new clothes, college textbooks, that car. For her 16th birthday. My voice caught the wedding we couldn't afford but paid for anyway. Jessica picked up the scattered papers. Her movements, careful and deliberate. "She's struggling, William. The gambling problem is her choice." The words came out sharper than I intended. Every casino visit, every online bet, every lie about where the money went, her choices. I walked to the mantel and righted the family photo. 5-year-old Samantha smiled back at me, gap-toothed and innocent, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. When had that joyful child become this manipulative stranger demanding my life savings? "Remember when she wanted that dollhouse for Christmas?" I asked, touching the glass, "the one from the expensive toy store downtown." "I worked double shifts for 2 months to afford it." Jessica's silence was answer enough. We both remembered, just like we remembered the ballet lessons, the summer camps, the brand-name shoes, because her friends all had them. Every sacrifice made gladly for our daughter's happiness. And now she throws coffee mugs at me because I won't hand over my retirement fund. She didn't throw it at you, William. She threw it at the floor. The distinction felt meaningless. The violence was the same, whether aimed at me or my possessions, the disrespect identical. I bent down and picked up one of the inheritance documents. The legal language blurred as I read it, but I knew every clause by heart. Years of careful planning, conservative investments, delayed gratification, also Samantha would be financially secure after we were gone. "Peter's influence," Jessica said quietly. "He fills her head with these ideas about what we owe her. Peter didn't create her greed, he just gave it permission to show itself." The harsh truth hung between us. Our daughter had become someone we barely recognized, and we'd enabled it by always giving in, always writing the check, always smoothing over her latest crisis with our money. My phone buzzed a text message from an unknown number, but I recognized the writing style immediately. "Dad, I hope you're happy. Kids need winter coats and school supplies, but apparently your precious money is more important than your grandchildren. Don't expect to see them anytime soon. Grandchildren, the ultimate weapon in Samantha's arsenal. Emma and Jake, 8 and 6 years old, innocent casualties in their mother's war for my wallet." She knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum pain. I showed Jessica the message. Her face crumpled. She wouldn't really keep them away from us, would she? But we both knew she would. She'd done it before during smaller arguments, a week here, 2 weeks there. Whenever we didn't immediately comply with her financial demands, the children used as bargaining chips in her endless quest for money. "William, maybe we should reconsider." No, the word came out like a gunshot. "No more. I won't be held hostage by threats about the grandchildren. I won't teach Emma and Jake that love can be bought, that family relationships are transactions." Jessica flinched at my vehemence. In 38 years of marriage, she'd rarely seen me this angry. Even during our worst arguments, I'd never spoken with such cold finality. But something had shifted tonight, some fundamental understanding about my daughter, about our relationship, about the future I'd imagined for our family. The illusion of loving sacrifice had shattered as completely as that coffee mug. My phone buzzed again. 6 days later, I sat on our front porch with the Sunday paper, trying to find normalcy in the Father's Day morning routine. The coffee had grown cold in my mug, but I held on to it anyway, watching neighbors emerge for their weekend activities. The Hendersons were loading their car for what looked like a family outing. The Patels were working in their garden, their laughter carrying across the quiet suburban street. Jessica moved around inside the kitchen, the soft clatter of breakfast dishes drifting through the open window. We'd spent the week in careful conversation, dancing around the Samantha-shaped hole in our family dynamic. Neither of us had heard from her since that night. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits demanding money or reconciliation. The silence felt unnatural. In 3 years of financial crisis, Samantha had never gone this long without contact. Usually by day 3 she'd be calling with apologies and smaller requests, testing the waters before launching into her next major plea for money. But this was different. The completeness of the silence felt deliberate, calculated, almost like the calm before a storm. Part of me felt relieved, part of me worried. The rumble of a delivery truck broke through my thoughts. I looked up from the sports section to see a brown UPS vehicle slowing in front of our house. Strange, we weren't expecting anything and Sunday deliveries were rare unless someone paid extra for weekend service. The driver hopped out, consulted his handheld device, then grabbed a medium-sized box from the back. He approached with the professional efficiency of someone working holiday overtime. "William Carr, that's me. Happy Father's Day," he said, offering the package in his electronic clipboard. "Someone must think highly of you to pay for Sunday delivery." I signed my name, studying the shipping label as he walked away. No return address visible, just generic shipping information. The box felt surprisingly light for its size, roughly the dimensions of a shoebox, but weighing maybe 2 pounds at most. "Who's that from?" Jessica called from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "No idea." I carried the package inside, setting it on the coffee table where inheritance documents had scattered just 6 days earlier. "No return address," she approached, her expression curious but cautious. Jessica had always been more suspicious of unexpected deliveries than I was. Too many years of hearing about package bombs and mail fraud on the evening news. "Maybe it's from the grandchildren," she suggested, but her tone lacked conviction. "Emma did ask about Father's Day when we saw them last month, before Samantha had weaponized them against us." Before the threats and ultimatums, I pushed those thoughts away. "Could be," I agreed, though something felt off. The timing seemed too convenient, too calculated, and Emma wouldn't have paid for special Sunday delivery. Jessica leaned closer, examining the box with the methodical attention she brought to everything from grocery shopping to crossword puzzles. Her fingers traced the edges of the shipping label. "William," she said slowly, "don't open it." Why? She pointed to something I'd missed entirely in my casual handling. "Can't you see the holes? They're for breathing, which means something alive is inside." My stomach dropped now that she'd pointed them out. I could see tiny punctures in the cardboard, barely visible unless you knew to look. Small, precise holes that someone had clearly made on purpose. "Breathing holes," I repeated, my voice flat. "Something's alive in there," Jessica confirmed, backing away from the coffee table. "The question is what?" We stood there in our living room, staring at the innocent-looking package, as if it might suddenly sprout legs and run away. The morning sunlight streaming through our windows seemed less warm. Now the suburban quiet, more ominous. "Who would send us something alive?" Jessica whispered. But even as she asked the question, I felt a cold certainty settling in my chest. The timing, the anonymous sender, the Sunday delivery that ensured we'd be home and unsuspecting. This wasn't a gift, this was something else entirely. From inside the box came the faintest sound, a soft rustling that made us both freeze. The sound stopped as quickly as it had started, leaving us in tense silence. Jessica grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin through the cotton of my polo shirt. "Did you hear that?" she breathed. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Whatever was in that box was very much alive and it was waking up. A soft hissing sound emerged from the cardboard, barely audible but unmistakably real. We both froze, staring at the package as if it might explode at any moment. The sound stopped as silence stretched between us like a held breath. Then it came again, longer, this time a distinct hiss that sent ice through my veins. Jessica's grip on my arm tightened until her nails bit through the fabric of my shirt. "William," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Call someone now." My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, muscle memory taking over while my mind struggled to process what we were facing. The numbers felt foreign under my trembling fingers. "What's your emergency?" 911. "We have a suspicious package here, with something alive inside." The words tumbled out faster than I intended. It was delivered this morning with no return address and it's making sounds. Sir, can you describe the sounds you're hearing? I glanced at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. The hissing had stopped again, but we both knew it would return. Hissing. I said like. I couldn't finish the sentence like a snake, the thought felt too dangerous to voice aloud. Are there any visible threats or damage to the package? No visible damage, but there are small holes punched in the cardboard breathing holes. My voice cracked on the last words. Sir, I am dispatching officers to your location immediately. Please maintain a safe distance from the package and do not attempt to open it. Can you move to another room? We're about 6 feet away in our living room. Should we leave the house? Stay inside but keep your distance. Officers should arrive within 10 minutes. Do not touch or move the package under any circumstances. The line went quiet, except for the dispatchers. Typing 10 minutes felt like an eternity, when something dangerous was sitting on our coffee table, growing more active with each passing moment. Who could have done this, William? Jessica asked, once I'd hung up, the question I'd been dreading. The answer felt obvious, but saying it out loud would make it real, would acknowledge that our daughter had crossed a line I'd never imagined possible. I'm afraid to guess, I admitted, but my mind was already there. Connecting dots I didn't want to see. The timing on Father's Day wasn't coincidental, the anonymous sender who knew our address, our schedules, our vulnerabilities. Someone angry enough about our recent argument to plan something this elaborate. This cruel. Another sound from the box made us both step backward, not just hissing this time, but a rustling that suggested movement, something shifting, position inside the confined space, the argument Jessica said quietly 6 days ago. She was so angry when she left she didn't need to say Samantha's name. We were both thinking it, both arriving at the same horrible conclusion through different paths of logic and dread. But this, I gestured at the package. This isn't anger, this is something else, revenge. The word hung unspoken between us, too ugly to voice but impossible to ignore. Our daughter, the child we'd raised and supported and loved, despite her flaws, had sent us something designed to frighten or harm us. The box rustled again more insistently. This time, whatever was inside was definitely awake, now probably confused by its surroundings, possibly agitated by our voices and movement. What kind of person does this to their own parents? Jessica's voice broke on the question. Someone desperate, I said, though the words felt inadequate. Someone who thinks they've been wronged. But deep down I knew it was more than desperation. This required planning, calculation, a level of malice that spoke to something broken in the relationship between parent and child. Samantha hadn't just lashed out in anger, she'd crafted a deliberate act of psychological warfare. The sound of car doors slamming outside made us both jump through the front window. I could see a police cruiser in our driveway, 2 officers walking toward our door with the purposeful stride of people trained to handle dangerous situations. Relief flooded through me so quickly it made my knees weak. Professional help had arrived soon. Whatever nightmare lurked in that innocent-looking package would be someone else's responsibility to handle safely. The doorbell rang sharp and authoritative. In the tense quiet of our home. I opened the door before Officer Todd Reeves could knock a second time. His presence filled the doorframe, tall, solidly built with the practiced alertness of someone who'd handled domestic emergencies. The nameplate on his uniform read T. Reeves. Amber Car, I'm Officer Reeves. We received your call about a suspicious package. Yes, thank you for coming so quickly. I stepped aside to let him enter. It's in the living room. He wiped his boots on our welcome mat before crossing the threshold. Jessica appeared in the hallway still wearing her apron. Hands twisted nervously. Officer, we're just so grateful you're here. We didn't know what else to do. You did exactly the right thing, ma'am, his voice carried calm authority. Can you show me the package? We led him to the living room, where the box sat on our coffee table, looking smaller. Now that professional help had arrived, Officer Reeves approached carefully, pulling latex gloves from his utility belt. When did this arrive? About 35 minutes ago, I said. Sunday delivery. Someone paid extra for weekend service. He examined the shipping label without touching the box. No return address visible. And you heard sounds coming from inside, hissing. Jessica said quietly, like she couldn't finish, like a snake. Officer Reeves completed matter-of-factly. I've handled similar situations before, usually non-venomous, but we take every precaution. He reached for his radio. I'm calling animal control. They have proper equipment for safe removal. Dispatch. This is Unit 47 requesting animal control services at 1247 Maple Street. Suspected snake delivery and residential package. The radio crackled back with confirmation. 20 minutes for animal control to respond. Officer Reeves turned back to us, shifting from procedural efficiency to investigative curiosity. Do you have any idea who might have sent this? The question I'd been dreading. I felt Jessica's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. I don't know, I said carefully, probably just some kids playing pranks. His gaze sharpened slightly. Kids would need access to live animals, shipping materials, knowledge of your address. This required planning and resources. My mouth went dry. He was right. Someone with means and motive had deliberately sent us a snake on Father's Day. Have you had any recent conflicts? Family disagreements. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. Jessica tensed beside me, both of us walking the tightrope between honesty and loyalty. Nothing that would lead to this. I managed. Officer Reeves studied my face, noting the hesitation, but he didn't push. Instead, he pulled out a small notebook. Any unusual charges on your credit cards recently? Pet stores, exotic animal suppliers. The question hit me like a physical blow. Pet stores. The memory crashed over me with terrible clarity. That charge I'd noticed on last month's statement. Samantha used my credit card for emergencies. Reptile Palace, 127 of 50. I'd assumed it was something for the grandchildren. Not a snake, never a snake. Mr. Carr, are you all right? I forced my expression back to neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. I'm fine, just processing all this, but I wasn't fine. The puzzle pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity: the timing, the knowledge of our routines, the access to my credit card, the deliberate cruelty of choosing Father's Day. My daughter had sent me a snake. Will you be filing a formal report? Officer Reeves asked. We can investigate the package origin, pursue charges if we identify the sender. I looked at Jessica, saw the same conflict behind her eyes. Part of me wanted justice, but the larger part, the part that had spent 34 years protecting Samantha despite her flaws, couldn't turn her over to police. No, I said quietly, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. If it's just a prank, filing charges seems excessive. Officer Reeves made a note, though his expression suggested he'd heard this response before. Family loyalty trumping justice. Even when family members crossed dangerous lines. Another vehicle pulled into our driveway. Through the window I could see a white van with animal control services painted on the side. That'll be Mike Johnson, Officer Reeves said. Best wildlife specialist in the county. He'll have this resolved safely within the hour. But as I watched the animal control officer grab his equipment, I knew the real situation was just beginning. Mike Johnson from Animal Control worked with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd handled stranger situations than ours. Within 20 minutes he'd safely extracted a 3-foot corn snake from the shipping box, confirmed it was non-venomous, and loaded it into a secure carrier for transport to a local reptile rescue. Beautiful specimen, he said, securing the carrier in his van. Someone paid good money for this one. Corn snakes make excellent pets when properly cared for. Shame, someone used it for whatever this was. Officer Reeves shook hands with both of us before departing. Call if you remember anything else about possible senders, Mr. Carr? Even pranks like this can escalate if left unchecked. I nodded, maintaining the facade of cooperation while my mind churned with darker possibilities. Both vehicles disappeared down our quiet suburban street, leaving Jessica and me alone with the morning's aftermath. The living room felt different, now violated somehow, despite the professional cleanup. The coffee table bore faint water stains where Mike had disinfected the surface. The scattered inheritance documents had been restacked neatly, but their symbolic power had shifted. They were no longer tools of family planning, but evidence of the betrayal that had triggered this morning's events. Jessica busied herself in the kitchen, running water in the sink with unnecessary vigor, stress cleaning, her standard response to family crisis. I stood at the front window watching the Hendersons return from their Father's Day, outing their car, loaded with picnic gear and children's laughter. Normal families, normal Sunday mornings, normal fathers who didn't receive venomous surprises from their daughters. The credit card charge burned in my memory like a brand. Reptile Palace, 12,753 weeks ago, right after our argument about the inheritance. Perfect timing for planning revenge. My phone felt heavy in my hands as I scrolled to Samantha's contact information. Her smiling photo looked back at me, a picture from Emma's birthday party last year, before the financial demands had escalated, before the threats about grandchildren access, before this morning's snake delivery. "Are you really going to call her?" Jessica asked quietly from the kitchen doorway. I need to know for certain, and if she admits it, the question hung between us like a challenge. What would I do if my suspicions were confirmed? What action could a father take against a daughter who'd crossed such a fundamental line? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew the conversation was necessary. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Dad." Samantha's voice carried artificial brightness, the tone she used when she wanted something or was hiding something. "How's your Father's Day going?" My grip tightened on the phone. "How's my Father's Day going?" If she was innocent, the question was natural. If she was guilty, it was cruel mockery. "Interesting morning, actually." I kept my voice neutral, conversational. "Samantha, you wouldn't happen to know anything about a strange Father's Day gift?" "No, Dad, what happened?" Her response came quickly, almost too quickly, but it was what happened next that confirmed my worst suspicions. In the background, unmistakably, I heard Peter's quiet laughter, not the surprised chuckle of someone hearing unexpected news, but the satisfied snicker of someone who thought they'd gotten away with something clever. The sound hit me like a physical blow. All doubt vanished in that moment of careless amusement. My daughter had sent me a snake and her husband found it entertaining. "Just some confusion with the delivery," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Nothing important, I should let you go." "Are you sure everything's okay?" "You sound strange." Strange. I was discovering that my only daughter had tried to terrorize me with a live reptile and she thought I sounded strange. "Everything's fine, Samantha, enjoy your Sunday." I ended the call before she could respond, before my carefully maintained composure could crack completely. The phone trembled in my hands as the full weight of betrayal settled over me. Jessica appeared at my side, reading my face with the intuition of 38 years of marriage. "You heard something." Peter laughed, the words came out flat, emotionless in the background. When she asked what happened, he laughed like it was the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Her hand found my arm, a steadying presence in the shifting landscape of our family dynamics. "What are you going to do?" I looked down at the phone, then toward my home office, where the computer held access to bank accounts, credit cards and all the financial tools that had kept Samantha afloat for 3 years running. "I'm going to teach my daughter about consequences." 7 o'clock found me sitting in my home office, door closed, computer humming quietly in the evening stillness. I'd spent the afternoon in careful thought, walking through our neighborhood, reviewing 30 years of financial decisions that had brought us to this moment. The anger had settled into something colder, more purposeful. My desk held the accumulated evidence of a father's generosity, bank statements showing monthly transfers to cover Samantha's rent, credit card bills I'd paid without question, insurance premiums, car payments, emergency loans that were never repaid, 3 decades of enabling, disguised as love. The leather portfolio beside my keyboard contained documents I'd reviewed dozens of times, copies of checks written for her wedding, receipts from the car I'd sold to pay her gambling debts, bank transfers labeled emergency assistance that had become monthly obligations. Each piece of paper told the same story of a daughter who had learned to see her father as an endless source of money rather than guidance. The computer screen glowed as I navigated to our online banking portal. My fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, typing the familiar passwords I'd never shared with Samantha, though she'd managed to access plenty without them. First, the credit card account, the same one that showed the Reptile Palace charge from 3 weeks ago. Samantha appeared as an authorized user, a status I'd granted her during college for emergencies, 20-year-old emergencies that had multiplied into a permanent lifestyle. I clicked on Manage Users. The system prompted me with security questions, my mother's maiden name, the street where I grew up. Simple answers that unlocked access to tools I should have used years ago. Remove authorized user. The screen asked in neutral blue text. My cursor hovered over confirm for perhaps 10 seconds, not from hesitation but from the profound shift I felt occurring within myself. 30 years I've funded your irresponsibility enough. I clicked. User access revoked. Changes will take effect within 1 business hour. Next came the PIN changes. Samantha had somehow learned the numbers, probably watching over my shoulder during one of our many financial rescue missions. I selected new digits the year Jessica and I were married, numbers that meant something to our relationship but nothing to our daughter's schemes. The automated payments required more attention: monthly transfers to her checking account, the recurring payment for her car insurance, a subscription service for her gym membership that she'd convinced me was essential for her mental health. Each cancellation required confirmation, a digital paper trail of my decision to stop being her private bank. My hands remained steady throughout the process. No trembling, no hesitation. This wasn't cruelty, it was overdue accountability. I remembered the conversation last month when she called sobbing about the gambling debts, how she'd promised this was the last time, the final crisis I'd need to solve. I believed her, transferred another $5,000, and told Jessica we were helping our daughter learn responsibility. Instead, I'd been teaching her that consequences were optional. The final screen showed a summary of changes: credit access removed, automatic payments canceled, PIN codes updated. The work of 30 years of enabling undone in 30 minutes of methodical clicking saved changes. Outside my office window, the suburban evening continued its peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons were grilling dinner in their backyard. Mrs. Patterson walked her small dog past our mailbox. Normal families living normal lives, probably not dealing with adult children who sent live snakes as Father's Day gifts. I clicked save. The confirmation appeared instantly. Account changes processed. Updated information will be available immediately. Leaning back in my leather desk chair, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to Samantha: control, not the desperate, reactive scrambling to fix her latest crisis, but the calm authority of a parent who'd finally remembered that love sometimes requires saying no. Tomorrow morning she would discover that her financial safety net had been removed. Her credit card would be declined, her automatic payments would bounce, her assumed access to my resources would simply end. For the first time in decades, the consequences of her choices would be entirely her own responsibility. The phone on my desk remained silent, but I knew that wouldn't last long. Morning arrived with unusual peace. I sat at our kitchen table with coffee in the newspaper, watching sunlight filter through Jessica's herb garden on the windowsill. For the first time in years I felt no anxiety about potential financial emergencies, no dread of manipulative phone calls. Jessica moved quietly around the kitchen, refilling my coffee cup with the comfortable efficiency of 38 years of shared mornings. She'd asked no questions about my evening in the office, but her slight smile suggested she understood perfectly what I'd accomplished. The phone rang at 8:15. Samantha's name appeared on the caller ID, exactly as expected. I let it ring twice more before answering, using those extra seconds to center myself. Good morning, Samantha. Dad, what have you done? My card isn't working. Her voice hit me like a physical assault shrill. With panic I tried to buy groceries and it was declined. The automatic payment for my car insurance bounced. What is happening? I took a sip of coffee before responding. Samantha, I know you sent me that Father's Day gift. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from panic to defensive fury. You've lost your mind. How could you set me up like this? Set her up, not. What are you talking about? Or what Father's Day gift? The woman who had sent me a snake was now accusing me of setting traps. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. I didn't do anything, I said calmly. I simply stopped paying for your irresponsibility. This is insane. You can't just cut me off without warning. I have bills, obligations, responsibilities. I let the word hang between us, like the responsibility to treat your parents with basic respect, like the responsibility to handle your own finances instead of depending on mine. Jessica had stopped her morning routine to watch my face, reading my expressions for signs of stress, but I felt remarkably calm, almost detached from Samantha's hysteria. Dad, please, you don't understand. Peter and I are struggling right now. The apartment rent is due and my car payment, your car payment that I've been making for 2 years, your apartment rent that comes out of my account every month. Perhaps it's time you understood what actual financial responsibility looks like. Fine, you want to play games. Her voice rose to a pitch that would have concerned me yesterday. Don't expect to see your grandchildren anytime soon. Emma and Jake won't even remember you. By the time, Samantha, I cut her off with quiet firmness. Those threats stopped working. Yesterday morning, the phone went silent, except for her rapid breathing. I could almost hear her recalibrating, searching for the manipulation tactic that had always worked before. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she whispered, switching to the victim voice that had opened my wallet countless times. I'm your daughter, I'm struggling, and instead of helping me, you're punishing me for something I didn't even do, something she didn't even do. Still, no direct denial, no confusion about what gift I'd referenced, just the blanket deflection of someone who knew exactly what she'd done and was angry about facing consequences. Your struggle is not my responsibility, I said. Your choices created your situation. Your choices sent that package. Your choices will determine what happens next. You're being ridiculous. One little prank and you completely lose your mind. One little prank there. It was not quite a confession, but close enough to confirm what her panicked overreaction had already revealed. She'd sent me a live snake as a little prank and now expected me to continue funding her lifestyle. A prank involving a dangerous animal isn't little, Samantha? And a father cutting off financial support after 30 years of enabling isn't losing his mind. It's finally finding it. Her voice turned arctic. This isn't over, old man. You think you can control me by controlling money. We'll see about that. The line went dead. I set the phone down gently and looked at Jessica, who had watched the entire conversation with growing admiration. The morning sunlight still streamed through her herbs. The coffee still tasted perfect. She's coming here, Jessica said quietly. I nodded, probably with Peter. They'll want to continue this conversation in person. Are you ready for that? I thought about the question seriously. Was I ready for my daughter to arrive at our home with her unemployed husband demanding access to money she'd never earned, threatening grandchildren she'd already weaponized? Yes. I said, I think I am. The sound of a car engine roaring into our driveway shattered the morning calm. Tires squealed against asphalt as the vehicle stopped abruptly, followed by the sharp slam of two car doors. Jessica and I exchanged a glance. We both knew who had arrived. Heavy footsteps marched across our front walkway with determined rhythm. The doorbell rang, once sharp and demanding, then immediately again, when no one answered fast enough. I stood slowly, feeling remarkably calm despite the approaching storm. Stay here, I told Jessica quietly. No, her voice carried unexpected strength. We're in this together. The doorbell gave way to aggressive knocking. I walked to the front entrance and opened it to find Samantha and Peter standing on our porch like a two-person army, ready for battle. Samantha's face was flushed red with anger, her hair disheveled as if she dressed hastily and driven here in fury. Peter loomed behind her. His expression dark with malice I'd never seen directed at me before. Dad. Samantha's voice vibrated with barely controlled rage. We need to talk. We already talked. This morning. I remained in the doorway, not inviting them inside. I thought I was quite clear. She laughed harshly. You were insane. You can't just cut me off because of some ridiculous misunderstanding about a Father's Day package. Even now, standing on my doorstep demanding money, she couldn't bring herself to admit what she'd done. There's no misunderstanding, Samantha. You sent me a snake. I responded appropriately. Peter stepped forward, his bulk filling more of the doorway. Look, old man, maybe you didn't think this through properly. Samantha has expenses, responsibilities. Kids need things, kids whose mother threatens to keep them away from their grandparents when she doesn't get money. I replied evenly. Samantha's face contorted with desperate fury. Fine, you want to play hardball. You'll never see your grandchildren again. Emma and Jake will grow up knowing their grandfather chose money over family. The words that had once been my greatest fear now felt powerless. Against the clarity I gained, I looked at my daughter and saw not the child I'd raised, but the manipulative stranger she'd become. Samantha, I said quietly, that's not a threat, that's a blessing. The shock on her face was complete. This was not the response she'd expected, not the devastating blow that had always brought me to my knees before Peter's mouth fell open. You what? Samantha stammered. If you're the kind of person who uses children as weapons against their grandparents, then perhaps it's better that they're not exposed to that kind of manipulation while they're young. Peter's expression shifted to something darker. He stepped forward close enough that I could smell the anger radiating from him. We know where you live, old man, he said, his voice low and menacing. We know your routines, your schedule, you might want to reconsider your position. I felt Jessica tense behind me, but I remained perfectly still. Are you threatening me, Peter? I'm just saying that family relationships work both ways. You want to cut us off, fine, but don't expect us to just disappear quietly. Actually, I said that's exactly what I expect. And if you choose not to disappear quietly, that becomes a matter for the police rather than family negotiation. Samantha grabbed Peter's arm, perhaps sensing he was pushing into territory that could have legal consequences, but her touch didn't calm him. It seemed to fuel his aggression. You think you're so smart, Peter continued. You think cutting off our money makes you powerful. There are other ways to get what we need. I'm sure there are, I agreed. Like getting jobs, for instance, novel concept, but people have been supporting themselves through employment for centuries. This isn't over. Samantha hissed, her desperation transforming into pure venom. You'll regret treating us like this. Family doesn't abandon family and there will be consequences, there already are consequences. I said you're living them right now. They stared at me for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that no amount of threats, guilt, or manipulation was going to restore their access to my resources. The man who had spent 30 years being their personal bank had simply closed without another word. Samantha spun on her heel and stalked back to their car. Peter followed, but not before giving me one last menacing look. I watched them drive away, their car engine revving unnecessarily loud. Only when their tail lights disappeared did I close the front door and turn to Jessica. Her face was pale, but her eyes held something they hadn't seen in years: pride. We're going to need legal advice, I said. Evening brought the quiet normally that had become precious in our house. Jessica and I sat at our kitchen table after dinner, the domestic routine, providing comfort after the morning's chaos. She sipped chamomile tea while I nursed my second cup of coffee, both of us processing the day's events. The kitchen had always been our sanctuary for serious conversations. It was here we'd discussed buying the house plan for retirement, talked through concerns about Samantha's early struggles with money. Now it served as the place where we contemplated the complete breakdown of our family relationship I keep thinking about. When she was 8, Jessica said quietly, "Remember the Mother's Day breakfast?" She made burned toast and orange juice with too much pulp, but she was so proud. I did remember Samantha in her pink pajamas, standing on a kitchen stool to reach the counter, determined to surprise us with breakfast in bed. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's family now. She used to draw us pictures, I said, stick figures of our family holding hands. I kept them in my office desk drawer for years. I still have some in that memory box upstairs. Jessica's voice carried maternal grief. William, she's still our daughter, despite everything that's happened today. The words I'd been expecting all day. Jessica's instinct to heal, to find middle ground, to somehow restore what had been broken. It was one of the qualities I'd fallen in love with, this unwavering belief that families could overcome anything. Jess, I said gently, she crossed a line. I have one more step to take. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. What kind of step? I looked at my wife's face, seeing the concern there, the hope that whatever I was planning might somehow bring our daughter back instead of pushing her further away. How could I explain that bringing her back was no longer the goal? Something permanent, I said, something that ensures this morning's scene never happens again. You're talking about changing the will. It wasn't a question. Jessica knew me well enough to follow my thought process, to understand that legal protection was the only solution left, among other things. Yes, she was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the implications. Changing our estate planning would be more than a financial decision. It would be a formal acknowledgement that our daughter was no longer trustworthy. The grandchildren, she said, finally Emma and Jake, will be better off not learning that love can be purchased with money. I reached across the table and took her hand. Jessica, what she did today wasn't desperation. It was calculated cruelty, the snake, the threats, the manipulation. That's who she's chosen to become. But if we cut her out completely, we protect ourselves from future abuse. We protect our marriage from constantly managing her crisis. We protect our retirement from being slowly drained away by someone who sees us as a resource rather than parents. Jessica squeezed my hand, her thumb tracing across my knuckles, in the gesture that had comforted me through decades of smaller challenges. This wasn't a smaller challenge, though. This was the end of something fundamental. Will it stop her? She asked. If you change everything legally, will she finally leave us alone? It will remove her incentive for contact. No access to money, no inheritance to protect, no leverage to maintain. She'll have to find other people to manipulate. The pragmatism of it felt cold but necessary. Samantha would move on to easier targets, people who hadn't yet learned to recognize her patterns. I hate that it's come to this, Jessica whispered, so do I. But I won't spend our remaining years being held hostage by threats and manipulation. I won't let her destroy what we've built together outside our kitchen window. The suburban evening continued its peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons were walking their dog. Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden. Normal people living normal lives, when will you do it? Jessica asked. Tomorrow morning I'll call Margaret Summers first thing. She's handled our legal work for 15 years. She'll know exactly what needs to be done to make it ironclad. Jessica nodded, slowly, accepting the inevitable, even as it broke her heart. And if Samantha finds out, she will eventually. But by then the legal protections will be in place. Her anger won't be able to touch us anymore. I stood up from the table carrying our empty cups to the sink behind me. I heard Jessica's quiet sigh, not disagreement, but grief for the daughter we'd lost. Tomorrow I would take that final step. Tonight I would hold my wife and let her mourn the family we'd thought we were. Margaret Summers' law office occupied the third floor of a granite building downtown, its walls lined with legal volumes that spoke of 15 years protecting families like ours. I sat across from her mahogany desk with a manila folder of documents, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. William, she said, removing her reading glasses. When you called this morning, you mentioned needing comprehensive legal protection. Tell me what's been happening. Margaret had handled our wills, property transfers, and Jessica's mother's estate. She knew us as the stable couple who planned ahead and paid bills promptly. What I was about to describe would sound like a different family entirely. I explained the inheritance argument, the snake delivery, the blocked credit cards, yesterday's threatening confrontation. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious with each detail. Peter said, "They know where we live, know our routines." I concluded. It felt like a direct threat. She set down her pen and leaned back. William, this goes beyond a family disagreement. You're describing harassment and intimidation. We need to address this on multiple fronts. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Margaret pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's start with your will. You mentioned wanting to restructure your inheritance. I want my money to go to my grandchildren's education, not to my daughter's casino. I said that's a wise decision, William. Her voice carried professional warmth. We can create an educational trust fund that provides for Emma and Jake's schooling, college expenses, and legitimate educational needs, while preventing any access by their parents. She outlined the framework. An independent trustee would manage the funds, releasing money only for documented educational expenses. Samantha and Peter would have no access, no control, no ability to manipulate the children's inheritance. What about Jessica? I asked, fully protected? Of course, the house, your retirement accounts, her security. Nothing changes there. This only affects what would have gone to Samantha. Next came the restraining order documentation. Margaret opened a new file and began systematically recording yesterday's confrontation, the threatening language, the escalating pattern that had culminated in actual intimidation. The snake incident is particularly concerning, she said. Writing quickly, using live animals to frighten elderly parents shows planning and malice that courts take seriously. How long does this process take? The will modifications can be finalized within the week. The restraining order can be filed today. Once it's granted, any contact from Samantha or Peter becomes a legal matter rather than a family dispute. I felt something release in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for months, the weight of being perpetually available for Samantha's crisis of walking on eggshells to avoid triggering her threats of enabling destructive behavior. All of it was ending. There's one more thing, Margaret said. Based on what you've described, I recommend documenting everything for potential future legal action. Keep records of any attempts to contact you, any violations, any attempts to involve the grandchildren. You think it will get worse before it gets better. People who use manipulation and threats don't usually accept boundaries gracefully. When Samantha discovers she's been cut out of your will and served with a restraining order, her reaction may be significant, but that no longer frightened me. With legal protections in place, her anger would be directed at a system designed to handle such behavior, not at two elderly parents trying to enjoy their retirement. Margaret's assistant brought in the prepared documents. As I signed my name to each page, I felt the satisfying finality of decisions made and implemented. 30 years of financial enabling was officially ending. Our home would be legally protected from harassment. The restraining order should be approved by end of business. Today, Margaret said court officers will serve both Samantha and Peter by tomorrow morning. After that, any contact with you or Jessica becomes a criminal matter. I stood to leave, shaking hands with the woman who had just helped me reclaim control of my own life. Outside her office windows, the city continued its normal rhythm. "William," Margaret called as I reached her door. "You've made the right choices. Your family's safety and security come first." I nodded, tucking the folder under my arm. Tomorrow morning Samantha would discover that manipulation was no longer an option. Tonight Jessica and I would sleep peacefully, knowing the law was finally on our side. 2 days passed in the most peaceful quiet I'd experienced in years. Jessica and I fell back into the comfortable routines that had been constantly interrupted by Samantha's crisis: morning coffee without dreading phone calls, afternoon walks without checking for missed messages, evening dinners without discussing the latest financial emergency. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called to confirm what I'd been anticipating. "William, the documents were delivered at 2:15. Today both Samantha and Peter have been served with the restraining order and they've received copies of the will modifications. It's done." I thanked her and hung up, then sat quietly in my chair for several minutes outside our window. Mrs. Patterson was planting spring flowers in her garden. The Hendersons' children were riding bicycles on the sidewalk, normal suburban life continuing its peaceful rhythm. "The papers were delivered," Jessica asked from the kitchen doorway. "This afternoon," I confirmed. "It's finished." She came and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. We didn't need to discuss what Samantha's reaction might be or whether she would try to find ways around the legal barriers Margaret had erected. The law was clear, the protections were comprehensive, and for the first time in 30 years, we were truly free from her manipulation. I thought about the daughter I'd raised, the little girl who'd drawn stick figure families and made breakfast in bed on special occasions. That child had grown into someone who sent live snakes to her father and threatened to weaponize his grandchildren against him. The transformation had been gradual enough that I'd spent decades making excuses for increasingly unacceptable behavior. But the woman who'd stood on my doorstep demanding money and making threats wasn't someone I needed to enable any longer. The legal documents had created the boundaries that love alone could never establish. They got what they wanted. I'm no longer in their lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. Samantha had spent years threatening to cut off my access to Emma and Jake whenever I didn't comply with her financial demands. Now, through her own escalating behavior, she'd ensured that separation permanently, while simultaneously losing any claim to the inheritance she'd been so desperate to control. Emma and Jake would be provided for through their educational trust fund, managed by professionals who couldn't be manipulated or threatened, their college expenses, tutoring books, legitimate educational needs all secured without giving their parents access to resources they'd proven incapable of managing responsibly. Jessica squeezed my hand. "Do you think she understands what she's lost?" "She will." I said. "The restraining order means any attempt to contact us becomes a criminal matter. The will changes mean there's no inheritance to fight for, no financial incentive to maintain even hostile contact. She'll have to find other people to manipulate, and if she violates the restraining order, then it becomes the police department's problem, not ours." For 30 years I'd been Samantha's safety net, catching her every fall while she learned nothing from the experience. I'd sold my classic car to pay her gambling debts. I'd covered her rent when she claimed unexpected emergencies. I'd written check after check, always believing that this time would be different. This crisis would be the last one. The snake had been her final communication with me. Everything she wanted to say about our relationship had been contained in that box, dangerous, venomous, designed to frighten and intimidate. But instead of driving me back into compliance, it had driven me to Margaret's office and the legal protections I should have sought years earlier. As the sun set through our kitchen window, Jessica and I prepared dinner together with the easy cooperation of a couple who no longer carried the weight of constant family drama. No phone calls interrupted our conversation, no emergency texts demanded immediate financial rescue. No threats hung over our heads about access to grandchildren. The quiet felt profound, like the silence after a long, exhausting storm has finally passed. Tomorrow, we would wake up in a house legally protected from harassment. Our retirement savings would remain intact, earning interest for our own security rather than being slowly drained by someone else's poor choices. Our marriage would continue without the constant stress of managing an adult child's manufactured crisis. I had reclaimed my role as a father who loved his daughter enough to refuse to enable her destruction of herself and others. Legal boundaries had replaced emotional manipulation. Professional consequences had replaced family guilt. The law had given me back my life. Tonight, for the first time in decades, I would sleep without wondering what tomorrow's crisis would cost me. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.